Okay, let's get into the introspective trumps. This is line two of Tarot's Major Arcana. So, again, this is from the methodology that Rachel Pollack lays out in 78 Degrees of Wisdom. And she understood line two as consisting of experiences that cause us to develop internal knowledge, right? So, that make us more aware of ourselves, that show us to ourselves through both reality seeking, right? Like seeking the truth about ourselves, and also she's seeking the truth about the world and how through our reactions, right? Through our reactions, through negative and positive experiences, and also through overcoming danger and also the danger of certain parts and sides of ourselves. And so these are our cards in the major arcana of self discovery and also our inner work, right? Including shadow work to some extent, but the term shadow work, not for today. Anyways, strength. So, strength is great at talking about displays of discipline. At the end of the day, strength is about our ability to be disciplined, to be dutiful, to control ourselves, right? And be better able to control and influence the world around us. So, strength sees us setting boundaries. And also acting in our honor and our integrity, right? Balancing our internal state, balancing other people's needs with your own needs, right? Setting good boundaries is a big part of that too. And confronting problems head on, right? Like not pretending that something doesn't exist, but to actually solve the problems in front of you. And so, strength does that by finding balance, by figuring out the best first step to create lasting change. It helps us break patterns in the way that's often associated with temperance, but strength helps us break patterns too. And in some ways, the work of temperance is not possible until we've done the hard intervention work of strength. Strength also wants to keep it real, right? Especially with yourself, right? Strength wants us to keep it completely honest with ourselves in order to maintain safety for ourselves. So for instance, one time that I see strength come up a lot is when somebody has like a type, like a romantic type that they no longer want to pursue, right? Because they know that this type of person doesn't really give them what they need. And this is a card that can often give people the ability to say no to repeating that pattern, to cultivating safety, and also to integrate all the parts of ourselves, right? So, strength can also be seen as a harmonizing with our human emotions, our logic, our brain power, with our instincts, right? And those parts of our internal nature that are wilder and don't want to um, be bogged down or standardized by anyone. And this is also a really good card to see. Especially as it's a higher order of the emperor, or it's a double of four, is really great to see when you set boundaries with someone who's in power, right? And especially when you're not able to set direct boundaries, like, hey, you're not doing your work well, I don't want you to be calling me. But when you need to set soft boundaries, right? So instead of being like, look, I'm quitting my job about this, you might say, I just cannot be fully available to calls that come to my phone after 6, right? I won't be working, I'll be spending time with my family and taking care of my needs. If you need me to work, please let me know X amount of time in advance, and also, I will require an overtime rate, which starts at 2 hours, right? So that's strength. The hermit, right? The hermit retreats. The hermit needs a sense. The hermit needs some time and space in which to think, right? So they retreat from the world. You may be meditating. You're probably thinking. You could be overly scrutinizing yourself, analyzing yourself, going to a therapist, and also just like kind of looking. You may be guiding or teaching people in a less formal way, like a mentorship, or being mentored, right? The hermit at the end of the day wants to know the truth. They want to merge intellectual and spiritual knowledge. And also they want to remove themselves from hostile forces, right? So this is a time where maybe you're considered to be towards the top of your field and you're like, I'm quitting. I'm just quitting. Yeah, I'm not going to get into it. Right. And also to seek and find enlightenment and peace. And so this is certainly not the like retreat that's a long meeting nonprofit thing, right? This is actually being alone, listening to your own thoughts. Okay, welcome to line two, the introspective trumps. We're still using Rachel Pollack's framework, and she understood line two to consist of experiences that cause us to develop internal knowledge, right? And so these are the cards of internal discovery, internal work, and that lead us to a better understanding of ourselves so as to protect us, and make us ready for the hard work of enlightenment in line three. So the first one here is strength. And strength is one of those cards that helps us set our boundaries and understand what our boundaries are by harmonizing our most logical mind with our most pressing instincts, right? And so it honestly does the full one better, right? So it takes our instinct and then says, hey, hold on, like, has that been working for you? Do you think it'll continue to be working for you, right? So our keywords here are displays of discipline, setting boundaries, as I said, things that you're bound to do by honor and duty, balancing states and sides of yourself, but also confronting head on, confronting things head on. So this is a card that people sometimes see when they're needing to set boundaries with their boss, especially boundaries that can't come on too strong, like when you need your job, because this is a double of in the Rider Waite deck, right? Because strength is a card that can be also swapped with justice in more like in previous decks, but in the Rider Waite deck, Smith Rider Waite deck, strength is 8 and the Emperor is 4. So when you are using instinct and logic to get over on the way things are done and you know things to be done, you'll often see strength, because instead of saying, hey, I just quit this job, I don't want to fucking work here anymore, you may be saying, hey, I don't receive calls to my phone after 6. I will not be available to receive them. If you ever need me to work after 6 p.m., please know that I will need to be paid my overtime rate and the minimum starts at 2 hours, right? So it allows us to set healthier boundaries, but also to negotiate based on what we know about people, organizations, etc., so that we can get more of what we want. And its goals are to find a balance, right? So strength is a very logical card. It can be difficult to understand, but it wants us to be all of our parts of ourselves, right? It doesn't want us to default to one part of ourselves or other, right? Our ego, right, which is totally necessary at times, but it doesn't want us to default to our pattern recognition instinctual behavior. And so it needs to find a balance between those things, all the things that make you you. And it wants to affect lasting change. So when people are trying to make new habits, break patterns, right? Like things that are often associated with temperance, this is often the first card that you're going to see in order to do the work of temperance, which of course comes at the end of this line. You'll have to do the work of actually stopping whatever is hurting you, right? So this is a card that I see a lot when someone wants to break a bad habit, right? This is where you start. It isn't necessarily the process that keeps going, but it is where someone starts the work of that, right? Or where somebody knows that their romantic type is not serving them, and that kind of person is not going to make you happy in the long run. This is the card that helps you say, maybe I need a break, or maybe I just need to pick someone who feels different in these ways, right? So, and it's no surprise that one of the cards of therapy, therapeutic interventions, and retreat is the Hermit, and it follows strength immediately. And the hermit retreats from negative associations, right? Things that are keeping them down. Guides others to do this through mentorships mostly, but also through, being a therapist, through other kinds of work of that nature. Meditation, thinking, analysis of all kinds, sometimes pathologizing, right? And also just seeking the truth. And that is one of the main symbols of the Hierophant, of the Hermit's lantern, is that seeking of truth, being guided by one's own inner knowledge, right? And often the hermit will take us away from situations that we know were fucked up, or hostile to us, even before we see the signs, right? So the hermit's goals are to know the truth, to merge intellectual and spiritual knowledge, to remove oneself from hostile forces, and to seek and find enlightenment and peace. All right, on to the Wheel of Fortune. And this is one of our great turns in tarot, right? We're at card 10. We may be keeping time, moving through the seasons, right? So this is a calendar as well. Making the luck that you want to see in the world, right? Through your actions, observing holidays, meeting people during holiday seasons, but also accepting fate, taking a risk, doing a little gambling sometimes with the Wheel of Fortune. That's a thing. And ultimately, the Wheel of Fortune is here to realign us. Now, if you're someone who gets burnt out at the end of the fiscal year, right? Or in between quarters or whatever, the Wheel of Fortune is the card to watch, right? If you're someone who struggles with deadlines, the Wheel of Fortune is the card to watch, because one of the things the Wheel of Fortune reminds us is that time is cyclical. It's not linear, right? So if you're feeling like you didn't do enough, right? You may see the results of that in a certain cycle, but that doesn't mean that things won't be right again, right? So if you're someone who experiences a lot of perfectionism, the Wheel of Fortune can be a card to lean into. It says, "This too shall pass," right? It flows with the wheel of the year, and just kind of accepts that life is cyclical, right? It goes in cycles. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. And that is the story of the Wheel of Fortune in many ways. Oh, one thing to say about the Wheel of Fortune is also about the riddle of the Sphinx. And so it is sometimes something that asks you to use logic, right? Of course, Oedipus's riddle of the Sphinx, um, which we won't get into here, but by using your intellectual abilities, right? By keeping curious, by taking risks, you can often gain quickly, but that does not mean that you will not lose on the other side. And that is something to keep in mind with the Wheel of Fortune. Justice. So, Justice. That is a card that can be at 8 or 11, but here in this deck it is an 11. It enforces, it repays, it reports, it repairs, it decides, it subjugates, it deliberates. A lot of time when we're in legal situations, signing contracts, doing business in the most legal way, paying our taxes, right? That's where we see justice. And so, rightfully, a lot of people have difficulty with justice. And also, as I've said when I've written about justice in the past, like sometimes the legal system is the only opportunity for recourse that we have, right? So if you're getting a divorce, unfortunately, that is a legal situation that you're in. And as a reader, I definitely don't read about legal things and like legal cases and matters like that. And also, what a complicated thing to say, right? Because divorces, wills, marriages, all of them are legal things, right? So when somebody says, "I don't read on legal matters," it's like, okay, well, what do you do? If somebody's going to move, that's a legal matter. All of these things, they are deeply legal in the how much money you make. All these things are very much about the legality of things, right? So you're always encountering justice regardless of how you feel about them. Um, and one of the things that's important to understand about justice too is that this is not like juicy Justia, the Roman, like I guess like Uncle Sam version of justice, right? This is the Titan Themis. And also goddess. And so like their work was really more divine justice, right? To orient to the rules of the universe, which is something that they did for Zeus specifically. So they are not as associated with courts and things in terms of this depiction as their child is, who is more the like court cases kind of person, right? This is about retribution, cycles of debt, repayment, things like that, right? So it's not even really supposed to be justice for the people, right? It's like more about rules and the way that things are. And so an encounter with justice in this way like makes us aware of how we deal with the things in life that like fucking suck. And also how we work against systems of power in our lives, while also protecting ourselves against them, right? Because justice is going to deliver the king's justice, right? So it's an imperial, colonial kinds of justice, a colonial kind of peace, and also to enforce harmony, right? Can harmony be enforced? No, it can't, right? But there are going to be plenty of times when we are put in contact with these systems. And what they reveal about us is like our fundamental orientation, what our politics look like in practice, right? Like the way that we approach minutia and paperwork, right? Are we people who think that we can get over, not crossing our T's, dotting our I's? Because that's really when justice comes on in, right? I see that. It's what justice says. I see you. I see you. I see the things that you do, and I have opinions and feelings. So here we are at the Hangman, the Hang One. Um, Ego death is a major theme with the Hang One. I find the Hang One so useful. This is absolutely a card about psychedelics, right? It's a card about ego death of all kinds. A lot of times it does come with substances, right? And so that can be difficult for some people because you may be in a place where people are using drugs as a coping mechanism, right? That is a reality of some, for some people's lives that they need mind altering drugs, right? Whether it's coffee, whether it is cannabis, whether it is heroin, no matter what it is, right? Um, to see other sides of themselves, right? And that is an important thing. Um, One of the things that's important about the hanged man, the hanged one, is that they can be a martyr, right? So instead of speaking up and being honest about needs and feelings, they can let other people get over on them. And it also reminds us that sometimes accepting that we do not have, like, that it is that them people's company, right? That's been something that's helpful to me, right? Is them people's company. It's not my company. Um, and sacrifice can bring us closer to enlightenment, right? Like accepting, really sitting with what is, sitting with our inability to change things, our inability to change things quickly, with the problems that are caused by our own mind, sitting with the things that are we are powerless to stop, right? Things that recur, and that we can't get out of, like problems and traps, like like the penguin is in, that we can't help but fall into, right? And addressing them both through meditation and things like that, to try to reach some kind of spiritual understanding as to why this is happening, so we can end it. Because of course, our next card is death, right? The hangman's goals are to be one with the collective unconscious, right? To like really get a grasp on where they fit in with the whole, to know one's place within the whole of the world, right? To like really understand and grasp the level of power or powerlessness one has, how, so that you can make an informed choice, right? To alter one's perception, and also to, and this is very important, to prepare the body and soul for death and rebirth, right? So to get ready to make a change, one must really consider the spiritual consequences of where you're at now, not just of where you're going, right? American culture can be so goal oriented, right? It's like, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, and do that then. And especially if you're taking this course, like you may be like that too, right? Where it's like, okay, A, then B, then C, and then D, and then that is the cherry on top of all of it, right? But the hang one is not like, yeah, plan out your goals. It's like, take stock of your life, right? Like figure out where you're at, because you won't even know if that goal is a good one if you don't understand yourself, where you, and what has led you to make this goal, what has led you to this point. And a lot of times that like means surrender to the fact that you may change your life and things may not work out. And that not working out usually looks like death, right? Hopefully, and in many cases, hopefully that looks like death, right? Just like the falling away, transformations, endings, letting go, allowing things to shift and end and change. And death, I feel like most people are pretty familiar with death. It comes, comes at the end. In many ways, death is such a important introduction to tarot, because it says one thing: all things die. Sometimes they don't die for a reason, right? They just cannot last. And also, like that, when things aren't working, they should not be sustained, right? That they, if they cannot sustain themselves in this way, right? Like things that are not self perpetuating will pass away, with death, right? You won't have an opportunity to readjust. And of course, with death, we can see there's a king, a child, um, a pope, right? And they are all going to die. They're all going to die, because all things die in time. Um, and the hanged one really gets us ready for this idea, these falling aways, because it strips us of the way that we relate to our ego. It doesn't get rid of our ego, which is not, I don't think, a desirable thing. We do need our ego. But what it does is it prepares us to let things be cleared away, right? Because like if we're holding on to it, a lot of times, like that's just going to make the process more painful. And that's when we really get the tower up in here, which we'll be talking about in the next video. And after death, then we are in the realm of temperance, right? And temperance is sometimes a misunderstood card. It can be confusing, right? One of the things that it does is helps us recover from addiction, from patterns that have harmed us, from difficult experiences. It also has some very practical aspects, right? So we might be budgeting under temperance. That's a big one, right? We may feel better able to create things, or balance a checkbook if people still do that, right? Take note of money in, money out, and things like that. To heal our bodies or our minds, right? To move past harm, and also to transform that harm, often into stories or art or things like that. And so this is an internally focused work. One of the questions I often get about temperance is like, how is it like the star? And there are ways that that temperance is like the star, but temperance is the internal work needed to get to the star, right? So healing oneself, really being present, right? This is a good manifestation of self-care in a lot of ways. And I think that it also shows us the limits of self-care, right? Because it's great. like we require self-care, right? It's not like, is self-care good? Yeah, of course self-care is good. It's not even, it goes beyond good and bad because we have to do it, right? Without self-care, we're unable to do all of the other things that we are also required to do under capitalism. So there's like a way, well, first of all, that self-care as a concept, coming out of the cancer journals and a burst of light, is extremely bastardized in our society. And that being said, though, that is still necessary, right? Like, even if it is like a commodified bubble bath kind of thing, right? It's like people do need those opportunities to rest and recover. And at the same time, right, this is just, it's just some of the battle, right? Because what comes after temperance? The devil. Because if commodified self-care alone was able to topple systems of oppression, it would do that, right? If like just people feeling good and going on vacation were able to do that, then it would probably be banned or something like that. But also, it would have been much easier to accomplish than the reality that like self care and also community care and and myriad other modes of care that we're going to look at on the line of enlightenment are important for this process. The goals of temperance are to stabilize uncertain states, much like strength, right? And also to bravely move on after a difficult time, to find hope and peace, and this is very important, regardless of circumstance, right? To find one's own internal source of joy, and also to tap into the frequency of miracles and magic. And I don't mean like solfeggio tones or whatever, but like just to like really make oneself aware that miracles can happen, that like magic is something one can access, right? Not in a what do you call it, prosperity gospel kind of way, but just like that we do have the power to change things using things that are not currently considered science, right? That things happen for reasons that we can't know and that we're not privy to, and that doesn't make them any less true, right? And so all of these are part of the internal work that we need to do on the fool's journey in order to more deeply understand how to transform and transmute the issues that we see in society, after we are doing that work on ourselves, and also alongside that work that we're doing in ourselves, because the work of the line two really makes us more available to where that intersects. Because by having three lines, right, we see the world itself, on our first line. We see enlightenment or transformation, is what I would like to say about it, on the other side. And in the middle, we're seeing a little bit of both, right? In strength, we're seeing like our ability to speak to systems that are directly bearing down on us, and also the reality that we need a job in the world, right? In temperance, we're like seeing that like lots of things happen that really fucking suck and that we can't really control, and also that we can take care of ourselves and show up for ourselves, right? So I will see you in the next video where we'll talk about the line three, and the trumps of enlightenment or transformation.